we really want to hear it? Yes, that's right. I'm talking about a we with a capital W. I'm talking about women who are willing and able to hear the truth about other women. Not the truth about ourselves, but the truth about other women. Let me start by making it personal. That's what we are good at. I'm not going to talk about myself, but about a good friend. A close friend. An old friend. A metaphorical friend. The kind of friend each of us has. She was sitting at my table last week, drinking green tea to get into the mood to go to a movie called Pain and Happiness, but then in Spanish. What we were talking about, let me just pause here and say that I don't want to generalize. I don't want to put all women in the same basket. I'm not saying that women amongst women will never talk about politics, or about the climate crisis, or about emissions of whatever. I'm not saying women do not talk about Europe, or about how Coca-Cola and McDonald's deal with sustainability. I know who the president of Kenya is. I know where to find Kurdistan on the map. I'm also not saying there are important topics and unimportant conversation topics. Just the other day, I casually nudged a friend to even more casually inform another friend how his love life was, the current state of his marital bliss. And afterwards, when he reported back to me, after some evasive murmur, I heard about how they had started playing pool. It had been very nice, period. Gezellig. Also, just so you know that I know, the president of Kenya is Uhuru Kenyatta, which is actually quite easy to remember because the name of his country is actually right there in his name. Also, let me pause and say, I sometimes have trouble understanding why what concerns me doesn't concern the whole world. I come home late at night, have experienced the craziest things, have had the stupidest conversations. I have looked in a magic mirror. I have seen myself in a different light. Let me say, I went deep. The next day, the messages over and over, the kisses and the cuddling smileys, they tell me again and again, I love people and they love me. And, well, could there be something else that really matters more? Could be. Well, you know, says the person I come home to and who sits on the couch, not with his feet on a crate of beer, not with his upper body bared, but simply in a checkered shirt. You know what a checkered shirt is? With glasses on his nose and a book on his lap. I really don't have to hear it all, he says. Or simply, please keep your shit with you. I have something else to do, and points to his book. What? So that girlfriend I was talking about at my table, green tea, pain and happiness, we've known each other for 30 years, perhaps longer. She once shoved a note to me when we were students. We were in a lecture room, and the note said, please come at my place and have dinner with me, and that I would not be brought home. It was as if someone asked me to go out, and I said yes. It's a pity that I cannot comment more precisely on what the two of us have done in the past 3 decades. What is relevant for tonight is that she has had a new love for about 3 years. I know there's something untotally cowardly about lecturing on women and desire and keeping yourself out of the question. But what I've learned about women and desire in the last, let's say, 40-ish years, it is that nothing feminine is alien to me. And as far as I'm concerned, female is the superlative of humanity. Her story, my story, that idea. Although, I have to say that, sipping my green tea, listening to her story, I almost exploded with the book that Lisa Taddeo wrote is a miracle of empathy, a masterclass of empathy. She wrote the stories of 3 women in detail, their dreams, their desires, their reality. The result is not so heartbreaking as as it is shocking. If she hadn't written down those stories with so much class, taste, juiciness, and style, it would be like reading a social disorders manual here, in which the pathological abnormalities, the total examples of cognitive dissonance, would be arranged by their type and what medication is required. Instead, we read 3 women and think, yes, that's right, precisely, that's how it goes. Once again, let me pause and say, from about the moment I learned to read, I must have been 3, maybe 4, I've been poisoned by fairy tales and other girls' literature. Sometime redemption awaits. That's imprinted on me. That was the idea, apparently, that there is a seeking one and a wanted one. And because I loved reading, I read this story with the happy ending about 7 times a day. There is someone who is going to redeem me from this event, from this world, from this life. Maybe he is riding a horse, maybe he has a crown on his head, or he wears clogs, he has a sword at the ready. Maybe he has an army under him, he looks like a wolf, but he turns out to be a fox. He is coming, he comes for me at last. Is that it then? Is that the explanation? That at my age I'm now facing a woman whom I have known for 30 years, and who is also my age, who is a reader and who has suffered for love almost her whole life, and who is incredibly creative in fooling herself? She wanted children so badly that she had been fructified by someone who had written problem case on his forehead, and then she wanted to leave so badly that she settled for a shack somewhere in the suburb and a complicated relationship with her children. And now, today, she lives somewhere nice. Her children are doing fine. She can handle her ex. They see eye to eye. She has a proper job. But oh my God, she's in love. Yes, she's in love. And there's one small complicating something. The object of falling in love is married. He comes and he goes when it suits him. She sometimes hears nothing from him for weeks. And sometimes he is all over the place again, all over her body, and oh God, she can't do without him. I do not immediately know who I felt for the most with Lisa Taddeo's 3 women. Was it Maggie with her little girl fantasies, in which a teacher could of course play the role of a savior? Was it Lena, who went so insane to meet her lover, if only for 10 minutes, to put everything aside, to get in the car, and Jesus, in the end, it was also worth it? That touches, those kisses, that sex, nothing could beat that. Or was it the cool, attractive Sloane, always in control, always willing to make her husband happy, if necessary at the expense of herself? It's not about who I sympathize with, it's about knowing their stories. I won't tell which story I know best. A few weeks ago, the American essayist Katie Royf was here in Amsterdam, giving a lecture about famous feminist icons and their messy love sex life. There was something she said that impressed me. I thought, yes, it is, that's right. Royf said that ultimately fiction, so novels, tell a more interesting truth about how life is apparently lived. That there's a gap between theory and reality, that there's a friction between what you think and what you do. If you read novels, then you know that, then you accept that. In fact, then the truth cannot be absurd enough. If you read non-fiction, however, you are offended. You think, that's not me, that's not what I would do. One more pause. Let me float an idea here. Suppose that besides nuclear energy, wind energy, solar energy, there's also such a thing as emotional energy. I mean, I know that it exists, emotional energy, but suppose it could also make engines drive, propel, heat things up. How happy we would be with all that female desire, how economically useful it would be. All those turbine motors, I see those engines running. I don't know where, in what field, but I'm sure people, men, will figure that out. That girlfriend, the green tea, the struggle. She finally got back her sanity. She wanted to get rid of that married lover. She had discovered that she was herself a valuable person, nice. She was so strong that she could tell him to leave her. Jesus, what a relief. The very last night, the night of their goodbye. Well, no, you don't believe that Dick, of course, he had to disappear into the middle of night again, while this would be their special night. But okay, his cowardness, made it easy for her too. It underlined everything. This was definitely goodbye. And me, the best female friend, I listened to it. I was happy. Long ago, I advised her to stop seeing him, but that had ended in a drama. This scenario sounded good. She was rid of him, and she had done it herself. Sorry, let me pause just one final time. Women among themselves, the female gaze to the max, women are each other's worst advisors. Everything so-called for the well-being of the other. Sure, you don't have to take another child. Do you know what would be good for you? Cut your hair really short. Take a leave. Just don't work so hard. Of course, wait another year with that book you're working on. Did you know that poison green looks nice and edgy on you? Or purple? You know what? You should make up with Mr. Fuckface. Advising someone to break up is always a bad idea. A bad idea. It comes back in your face like a boomerang. I've done it too many times. Perhaps the reason that I now kept my mouth shut when the friend there opposite me suddenly came up with a big surprise. She started to blush and shine. Yes, she'd said goodbye and farewell, had gone on a kind of retreat, a treatment for herself. She had learned how much she was worth, that she could sing, she could paint, write poetry, anything. And who was right there on the sidewalk when she was doing her little holiday laundry? Who rang the doorbell with a large bunch of make-up flowers and a corresponding package of get-well promises? Indeed, the unreliable lover was back again, completely back on track, and oh my God, it was wonderful, amazing. He would do his best this time, really, I mean, really, really. One final pause, I promise. That book that the man I came home to was reading on the couch in his checkered shirt. That book from which he looked up was called How Democracies Die. But it could also have been Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, or Post-War by Tony Judd, The Hitler Conspirator by Eberhard Schmidt. What it could never have been, the book he was reading, was Three Women from Lisa Taddeo, Slutfear from Sonny Bergman, I Still Do from Elke Geurts, or Ladder of Years from Ann Tyler. There's a great scene in that book from Ann Tyler. It goes as follows. Delia is walking in a supermarket while she is doing the groceries for her family. A stranger came up to her in panic, and he asks her, he begs her to act like his fiancée for a moment. His ex is also somewhere in the supermarket, and he wants to make her jealous by walking by with a new lover. Delia's fantasy immediately runs wild. She plays her role better than good, and before she knows, she ends up in a long, passionate kiss with a total stranger. When she's back home, she suddenly knows for sure that she can never be satisfied with her husband and her life. At night, she lies awake from that man in the supermarket, obsessed by the thought of seeing him again as soon as possible. Lisa Taddeo actually writes a mirror scene when she talks about Lena, the unfortunate housewife. I quote, "She feels that she's suffocating. She has these children she has to keep alive, day in, day out. If anything happened to them, she would die. But at the same time, they are weights. She feels alone in caring for them. She feels alone in caring for herself. She wishes she could stop caring for everything. She wishes she could burn the house down. She wishes her husband would like to touch her and make her feel like a living thing. She tried telling a friend. She tried asking for help. Oh, Lena, her friend said, laughing. Of course you feel terrible. You're married." The American feminist Betty Friedan once invented a beautiful word for this special kind of unhappiness, the feminine mystique, or our own Joke Smit spoke of the female unease, het vrouwelijk onbehagen. What is the truth about women and desire? That they have a lively imagination and well-developed survival strategies, that they want to stay awake and not want to be like zombies, sleepwalkers, that they want to keep the economy going. One last thought. Men stand in line in front of the coffee shop. Women lose themselves in the rush of love. I make a fresh cup of green tea for that friend who is totally happily in love again. Good for her, although I try not to be too passionate about this. I think she's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Marja Pruis, for these wonderfully stimulating opening words. Thank you. My name is Sarah Meuleman. I'm an author, and I'm delighted to host this evening about female desire and the female gaze. With me on stage is author and journalist Lisa Taddeo, whose novel Three Women has met great critical acclaim and has taken the international bestseller lists by storm. It is said to be the most in-depth look at the female sex drive that's been published in decades, but also to confirm grim truths about female desire and power. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Marja Pruis just called your book a masterclass of empathy. Can you identify with that?
I mean, I practice empathy when speaking to people who are divulging their deepest secrets.
Mm-hmm.
I think that to do anything else would be just unkind. So, I mean, I don't know about master class or anything, but I do have empathy.
Yeah. And it's very clear from the book that you do. But you had three women, indeed, talk to you about the most intimate details of their desires and their sex life. I was wondering, how did you find the three women that you portrayed in this book?
So I began by driving across the country, the United States, about 6 times. The first thing I did, which we were talking about earlier, was I went to a place called the Porn Castle in San Francisco.
The Porn Castle.
Yes.
Okay.
I felt like I was trying to find the nucleus of sex.
Yes, and was it? Was it?
No, I mean, it might have been like an offshoot, but it definitely wasn't the nucleus. I was following 2 women. One of them was having sex on camera at this place where pornographic films were being made, and she was having sex with men and machines.
That was in the Porn Castle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And her girlfriend was directing her, which I thought was so interesting, because not only are you directing your lover having sex with other people, but you're directing your female lover having sex with men. So I thought that was I thought it was interesting. And I spent several weeks trying to figure out what the director was feeling and what her actor girlfriend was feeling. And they just kept saying that it was a job, which I believed. It was a job for them. But at the same time, after spending so much time with that sort of, there was a lot of sex going on in the Porn Castle, as one might imagine, I grew bored of the acts of sex and people who were not sort of talking about things that went beyond them. Like
was it the emotional detachment that
possibly
put you off? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that it put me off so much as I would write about it for 3 or 4 pages, but I could not see myself being engaged for a chapter even.
Okay. So the Porn Castle wasn't going to be it for the novel?
It was not.
Then you started hanging flyers in CD bars and supermarkets.
Exactly, yes. Well, I also hung them on art installations.
Okay, excellent.
I was trying to find, I driving across the country, I posted flyers on cars to go, not people's private cars, sometimes though, maybe, tree trunks. Without hurting the tree, I would use Scotch tape. And
But what did they say? I need women to open up about their sex life.
that would have been very straightforward.
Yeah.
And I wish, it's funny because I hear that and I'm like, oh, that's what I should have said. But no, I
What
didn't.
did it say?
One said, they were all different. I had like 10 different, I also had business cards that I would like leave on like the cash registers of coffee shops. So I had a wide range of methods, but none of them involved the very straightforward looking for blank. It was like unrequited love, ? Do you have a tale of wild desire? And then I had like,
And then a lot of men responded, probably, or not.
no, it was about 90% men.
Yeah.
And they were like, yes, I didn't find any of the people, actually one woman I did find from the flyer. But it was an anomaly. So yes, no.
And then you came across the 3 women in the book, as Marja Pruis described them really beautifully.
Yes.
Lina, Maggie, and Sloane.
Yes.
And but you spoke to a lot of more women, and then you kind of brought it back to these 3. Why these 3?
I mean, they plainly just gave me the most of any. I mean, I spoke to hundreds of people, and many of those, not many of the hundreds, but at least 20 or so for more than a month or 2 months. And these 3, I wouldn't even call them women in the sense that they were 3 human beings that just told me so much. And it's hard, it's like now that the book's been published, I have friends coming up to me who are like, you could have talked to me. When during the writing, during the research of the book, they would say, oh my God, are you writing about me right now? So there's been quite, a sea change.
Yeah.
So it's hard, is my point, to get people to talk about not just sex, but desire. And I think, the difference is, I think that with sex, you can call your friend up the next day and sort of say, oh my gosh, and then we did X, Y, and Z. But it's a different story. That's a mechanical sort of thing for the most part, to say like, so-and-so, we did this, and then he or she left, and I feel empty, I feel X, Y, Z. I like this person I shouldn't like. I like a married man. I like a woman. I like whatever it is. It's something that you can't describe because it's scary to say it out loud. It's scary to say it to a friend or a family member.
What makes it scary?
Because I think once you put a secret out into the atmosphere, it gets away from you and it's no longer yours. Yeah. And I think that if you tell a friend, like if you tell someone that you know about a person that you're sleeping with, now that's out of the bag, and that person is going to hold that with them and going to have some sort of power over you. Even though I was writing a book, you would think that would be, more sort of scary, but in a sense it wasn't one, because the book was so far off from anything happening. I don't think that people, one of Maggie, who's the young woman in North Dakota who allegedly has the affair with her teacher, about a month before the proofs were ready, her mother said to me, you've been talking to us for like 3 years now. Like, you can say that there's no book. Like I was some crazy person. It was like, so I think people just forget that this person isn't going to sort of tell their story, but at the same time their story is being told, they're telling their story, and it's not sort of going out to another friend.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a difference, yeah. It's important to point out that you followed these 3 women for 8 years, and that you followed them really closely. You read their text messages. You were there after they had betrayed their husband. With Lina, for instance, you drove, not behind her, but to the river where she meets her secret lover. And then afterwards, she came to you, and she could immediately tell you what she felt, what they did?
Yes, thrust by thrust.
Yes.
So it was for Lena. Lena is the housewife in Indiana who her husband had just told her that he no longer wanted to kiss her on the mouth. And then they went to a couples therapist who said, Lena, the way that you feel about wet wool is the way that Ed feels about kissing you on the mouth.
Yeah.
So, it was a shocking, and then she was about to, as you said, start up a relationship with her high school lover with whom she had always been stratospherically obsessed. So to both be at sort of the depths of pain with a decade-long marriage of being sort of bodily abandoned, you are now also about to embark upon this love affair. So you both want to talk about your pain and shout about your crush from the rooftops. So she wanted someone to sort of just be a sort of virtual diary for what she wanted to say.
Yeah. And who were you for her then? Were you like a ghost, or were you a friend, or what would you say?
I think I was more ghost than friend.
Yeah.
I was somewhat of a cipher.
Yeah.
A person that I think she, because even though we talked and it was always me asking the questions, and so when someone, it's kind of like, if you have a friend who's in the middle of some, debacle, some terrible thing that's happening, you're always kind of listening. So it's that times 2 years.
Okay.
And you kind of, as the person listening, you get used to listening, and
Yes.
as the person talking, the speaker gets used to talking.
You have this pattern, these roles
Yes,
are
totally.
set. Yeah. Now, for a book about sex, there's actually surprisingly little sex in it, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Is it then more about desire?
Yeah, I mean, Lena's sex scenes are the most explicit.
Yes,
because
they are,
she
yeah.
was, whereas, I think one would think that Sloane, who has threesomes, whose husband watches her have sex with other men, I think that temptation is there to write more about her sex, when in fact it was Lena to whom sex was more important. I think it was Lena who was finding herself in the actual acts, like not just being titillated or having orgasmic experiences, but actually, she was raped as a young woman, and then she was not touched by her husband for many years. So she was becoming in touch with her body in a way that I think was less about Aidan, the man, than it was about, he was like a conduit by which she found herself.
Yeah. But what struck me is that all of the three women are in a position where they adore the man, where the men have a certain power over them, and even who they are, they see that in relation to the men. So why did you pick these three women, with this kind of relationships towards their lovers, their men?
I think that, I really didn't pick them.
Mm-hmm.
So much as they picked their stories to be told. And I think that when you're in that sort of when you're in a situation where you feel powerless, you want to talk about it more than if everything's going well in your life. You're like, oh, we painted the house seafoam green, and we got a new car. It's like nobody really cares, one. And two, if you're in that sort of a plateau place, you don't really need to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that these women were both at the sort of depths of pain and or the heights of passion, and I think that's when people want to talk. I also think that, they were not, I don't think that they so much ceded control to their lovers as ceded control to kind of wanting to lose themselves in something that was not wrote.
Yes, but they really lose them. Lena, she's like completely dependent of what her lover wants. If her lover wants to meet her, then there she is.
Well, I think it's less about her lover wanting to meet her than her wanting to meet him. He was not saying, come to me or you will die. She was thinking, if I don't go to him, I will die.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I think that, I think she had the most agency in the book.
You do?
I do. I do, because
Because it has been so often that I said, Lena, come on, get it together, girl. Just don't let that man lay everything out for you.
but if you look at it in the sense that she had not had this kind of sex ever,
Yeah.
and felt what she was feeling,
Yeah.
then, and to have 2 children that she had to care for, with a husband that she didn't want to be with her, she would find a babysitter at the drop of a hat, drive one car to the other car to not put on too many miles over each of them, and to sort of like, order pizza for the kid, just throw everything. It's like a storm of doing everything at once. That takes a lot of planning.
Yeah.
It
To be
takes-
with him.
To be with him.
Yeah.
And it's not him going, come. It's her going,
Yeah.
I must go.
Yeah.
So, at what point is he the wrong man or person? Yeah, probably. But who are we to decide who is the right person? Sometimes it looks from the outside like somebody's with the right person, and then you find out, years later that it was absolutely awful the whole time.
What does your book, if I've read the book and I close it, what do I take from your book? What would you like me to take from your book?
That we judge so much that I think it's almost second nature to judge, and that a man said this to me, and it was very. First of all, it was a man who'd read my book, so I was like, yay. And he said that before reading this book, he had not realized how indifference could be so wounding. And, when it comes to Lena, who's just waiting for Aiden to just text her one word back, and he doesn't, all she wants is to be seen, to be replied to, even if it's one word. She just wants to hear,
Even
no,
if it's no. Yeah. And what you've spoken with so many people about the subject of female desire. What did you take away from that? What struck you?
Many things struck me. Well, one of the things that struck me was that everybody's having a lot more sex than you think.
Oh,
and
really?
I thought, oh yeah, it was shocking. I was like, this person's doing that. There was a lot of that.
Okay.
And once you start talking to people, you hear a lot of things, and it's just like people you don't think might be doing something very exciting. So that was a shocking thing for me. And I saw a lot how much all the mini assaults and the large assaults that we endure as women, as human beings, add up to the way that we present sexually in our future, and the way that our mothers present, sort of weigh upon us, which is why I talked about my own.
Yes, there's a very personal prologue and epilogue about you and your mother.
Yeah.
There, yes. And what was the reason why you put that in?
Because I saw, one of the things that I noticed the most was that we talk so much about daddy issues, at least in the American lexicon. That's a big, men will say, oh, she's got daddy issues, which means, I don't know, some variety of things that's good for the man. I've never really understood that, but I've heard it so much that. But with me, I had mommy issues, or I have mommy issues, and so many of the women that I spoke to have mommy issues. And whether that means that they know, too little, too much, or the right amount about their mother's past and desires, it was still it was so interesting to me how much it affected them, their desire, what they didn't know about their mother's desire, what I didn't know about my mother's desire, makes me think all the time. And she passed away, I can't ask her, and that's something that, it's something I saw very, very much.
Yeah. In the book, you give these women a voice, but it's actually quite a literary book.
Yes.
So I was wondering, did you really use their words? Did you copy their words literally, or did you use a lot of your own tone of voice and take a bit of freedom with what they said?
For each section, I wanted them to each speak for themselves. So I wanted Maggie's section to be youthful, the way that she was with the her teacher the text messages. So we texted a lot. I was nursing my child, and it was incredibly boring. Like, you know, some moms like look at their baby and they coo, and I just wasn't a cooer. And I like, you know, sat there and did what I needed to do physically, but inside I was like, this is so boring. So,
So you were texting.
I was texting with Maggie, and I felt guilty the whole time. But I'm like, I'm working. I'm actually working, and this is for my baby. And but yes. So with Maggie, I wanted it to be youthful. With Lena, I wanted it to be her sort of the country aspect of her mixed with the sort of Indiana University student who had studied Freud and had all this sort of unlived life in her. And for Sloane, who was more patrician and spoke with a certain elegance, I wanted to keep her voice in there. But I also wanted to have a sort of authorial homogeneity to all of it. Yeah. So, you know, my voice is in there too, but I'm translating them. You know, when it came to Maggie, we would unpack a text message for like hours. Like I was like, you know, at what point, how long did you wait until the next one came in? And we would talk about the next text message.
Wow. You must have had like hundreds of thousands of words.
Very many, hundreds of thousands.
Yes. Like how many?
Probably like 800,000.
And you all brought this down to like what?
120.
Wow.
Yeah, which is what the original contract said on the book. It said 120,000 words.
Okay.
Untitled work on sex, 120,000 words. So I was like, you know, 800,000 words. Yeah. And I was like, here. Yeah. I didn't hand them all in, but I handed in a good 300.
Wow, that must have been quite hard.
Yeah.
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 Now, one thing that is often written about the book is it is presented like the book, what I read in the beginning, the best book that has been written about female desire in the past decades. But then you have these three women who have kind of a similar relationship, well, it's not the same, but towards the men, the adoring I talked about. So it does really give an image of female sexuality in general. They're kind of the same, a little bit the same-ish types.
Yes, I mean, I don't...
Big sigh. You hear this a lot.
I don't think that, you know, I never set out to... I mean, maybe in the beginning I set out to sort of write a sort of sweeping story about sexual desire across the country, but when it came down to these three women, when it came down to the last 15 people, I realized that I had 15 people or three people who were telling their own stories. And what I really wanted to do was just get very, very, very insular into specific stories to show that, you know, three ordinary people were as important as anybody else. Yeah. You know, when you think about like celebrities, how many words are written about celebrities? And for me, I've always been like, well, why does a celebrity need that many words? They're just by dint of being on a camera, all of a sudden they're interesting, when it's not really true. I've interviewed a lot of celebrities, so I'm just like, I gotta make this sound interesting, otherwise I'm not gonna have a job.
Okay, now another thing that is mentioned in reviews is that obviously the male voice is absent in the book. Yes. Are you toying with the idea of writing three men? No, that's clear. And why not?
I mean, you know, I think I'm, not that, I think that a man maybe could write about three men or another woman could. I am done with sex.
You're done with sex?
I'm done with sex.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe to my husband's chagrin, I'm done with sex. No, I'm...
and what aspect of it then?
I'm just, no, I'm not, I mean, I'm just joking, kind of. I mean...
Well...
I mean, I listen to so many people talk about sex that, I mean, there's still interesting stuff going on and there's new stuff, but I kind of just want to move on to a different topic.
Yes, and you're going to publish a novel next year, I heard?
Yes.
Okay, and it's not about sex, no sex.
No, well, there's a lot of sex.
Oh, yeah, a little bit of sex. Okay.
I didn't mean completely.
Okay, so we were talking about the male and the female perspective, and one person who knows a lot about the male versus the female perspective in literature is author and journalist Daan Borrel. Daan, please come to the stage, and perhaps we can give her a little applause. Welcome, Daan. And
Dankjewel.
I heard that you prepared a literary quiz for us
Yes,
tonight.
I did.
Go ahead.
Yes, so last week Julia from the Nieuwe Liefde called and she said, like, can we do the literary quiz you did on Lowlands? That is like a really big pop festival in Holland and they have some literary stuff.
Cool.
So last year I did with Helene de Bruyne, she's another writer. We did like the Literaire peep show in Lowlands, at Lowlands. And we tried to, we wanted to show like how sex is represented in literature, and especially we wanted to show like how the clitoris and the female gaze is not represented in literature, in history. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun. Someone wrote like live on stage, like in 45 minutes, a sex scene. And we had a jury, and we judged sex scenes, and I made hundreds of clitorises and penises out of paper, so that everyone could use those in the quiz. So unfortunately, I didn't have the time for tonight to cut them again. But the better part is that you guys are the jury. So we picked out like 4 scenes, 4 literary scenes, and you guys have to decide whether it's written by a male or a female. So we get a little bit warmed up, like if we can see if it's actually written by a male or a female. So maybe the first scene. Standing there, trying to get the waist of the skirt sewed to link at her side, the tops of her breast, swollen with untaken milk, pushing above her bra, she does have a plumpness, a fullness that called to him. So someone, maybe does someone know or recognizes the scene already? No.
Or shall we take a vote? Let's see which
Yeah,
people think
maybe
that.
we can do like, we thought like, if you think it's a man, you can stand up, because men stand while peeing. And if you think it's written by a female, you can just sit down. So everyone who thinks it's a man, stand up.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Want someone explain why you think this is written by men?
Maybe you can just ask
Pick
someone.
someone? Yeah?
Just ask someone.
You? Do you? Why do you
Yes.
think it's? You're a man?
Too late. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this microphone on? Yes. No, it's very difficult to motivate this. It's just a gut feeling that a man wrote. But it's, if you ask me to
Motivate?
I'm not
Yeah.
really sure. why.
Okay.
It is quite hard,
It is.
but you are right. It's written by a man. It's written by John Updike in Rabbit Run.
Totally
Oh,
John
yeah.
Updike.
And well, why we choose it is like you see that this is about a pregnant lady, and we wanted to show that like he still wants to make her attractive. So she's pregnant and she still has to be attractive. And the point is that if a female is not attractive, then most of the time the male writers get like irritated. So it's all her responsibility to be attractive all the time. Yeah, so that was the first one. So the second, quite long.
Yeah.
Everything they say serves only one purpose, to end up there in that alley where Adele is pressed against a green garbage can. He tears her tights to shreds. She makes moaning cries and throws her head back. He pushes his finger inside her, puts his thumb on her clitoris. She closes her eyes so that she doesn't have to cross the eyes of the bypassers. She grabs the man's soft, slender hand and pushes it further into her. He also begins to moan as he indulges in the unexpected lust of an unknown woman on a Thursday evening in December. Excited, he yearns for more. He bites her neck, pulls her towards him, puts his hand on his belt, and starts pulling the zipper down. His hair is confused, and his eyes are now wider open. He has a hungry look, as in the picture. She retreats and smoothes her skirts. He pulls a hand through his hair and comes back to his senses. He says he doesn't live far, really, near Rue de Rivoli. She can go. It was all right. So yeah, stand up if you think it's written by men, and stay seated if you think it's written by a woman. Wow.
Yeah, and there's this one person who was really,
Yeah.
he rose really quickly.
Yeah, why do
Adamant.
you think it's written by a man?
Yeah, well, let me think, because it's something which is really to do with a kind of first feeling, but it's quite rough, but that's females can have rough feelings, of course. As
Yeah,
well.
that's the difficult part.
That's not a very good reason, though. Yeah, it's my feeling. I don't.
Do you think it's written by a man because of like what is happening in the scene, or because of the way it's written?
No, because the way in which it is written. Yeah.
Okay. Someone else wants to explain why you think it's written by a female? Shall I just point? Can you just give the microphone to someone?
Perhaps the lady in the pink sweater over there? I'm curious why she...
I'm not sure this time, but I knew the one before because it had the word plumpness in it.
Ah,
A
right.
woman wouldn't say it of herself.
Yeah. But you're in doubt now.
Yes. But this one I'm not really sure.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, we choose this one because we thought like it's a difficult one. It's written by a woman, by the she's called Laila Slimani, and the title of the book is, I think it's another title, right? It's oh, this is the English title. Yeah, and the book is the whole book is about sex, and it also was represented like, wow, this is the new book about female sexuality, and I think it's a little bit flat, but what makes it hard, I think, is that there's not much feeling or thoughts in it. So that's why you could think it's written by a man, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's already a
hard
prejudice,
part.
Dan.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hard here.
Yeah, so that's why we wanted to use this one, so you can see like what is the female gaze? Like, do we even know what the female gaze is?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a
third.
minute. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is a very long one. So maybe I give you just 2 minutes to read it, or 3.
Oh.
Can you read it? Is it too far away?
Or can
It's
we
good?
just read the 6 first sentences and then...
Yeah. When I was 13 years and 10 months old, I met my first fellows on the avocado green silk sofa in my parents' living room, in the shade of an avocado green plant that my mother had managed to grow with her avocado green fingers from an avocado seed. The fallows in question was owned by Steve Applebaum, who was a senior, and its Kandinsky purple underside was illuminated with a highly interesting abstract pattern of blue veins. It was, in hindsight, a remarkable specimen, circumcised, obviously, and immense. What is immense when you have no comparison material? And filled with an impressive, entirely personal life.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah?
Let's just
That's
leave it
enough?
at that. And
Okay, well, you can read it further.
Yeah.
So, I think maybe the last part is more important. But
Okay, go ahead. The last lines.
I must have been awkward in the beginning, although I became an expert in it later on. In ecstasy, he threw his head, a controlled ecstasy though, as my father was watching the TV in the dining room, and came in his Brooks Brothers shirts or in a handkerchief that was quickly pulled out for this purpose. I forgot the technique, I remember the feeling exactly. It was partly reciprocity, because it was also power. I knew I had a very special power over him because of what I did, more than you could ever achieve with painting or writing. And on top of it, I came as well. Maybe not like Lady Chatterley, but at least it was a start.
Oh, I think there's a hint in there, or not?
What?
There's a hint.
Well, no, but I think...
There could be.
But
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
So who think it's a man? Stand up and stay seated if you think it's a woman. It's 2 persons, okay,
Oh.
more.
Okay, men.
Okay. Can you tell us why you think it's written by men?
I can't. Gut feeling. And maybe I do wish it is. But
Why do you wish?
That's nice. You say, maybe I wish it is?
yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
But I'm not sure whether I could put that into words.
Okay. It's interesting. Now, Dan, tell us.
This was
Which
written
is
by
it?
Irka Jong in The Fear of Flying, so it's really a famous book. And we choose this one, I think, because some people say like this is really the female gaze because she's doing and she's thinking and she's like watching everything from like a helicopter view.
Yeah.
Because like to be a woman is maybe to be looked at instead of looking, or like to be desired instead of desiring. So the consequence of that is that you get like a helicopter view and like watching yourself through the world. So yeah, maybe she's doing that there. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So last one. This is also a Dutch, from a Dutch, I can't say from who. She looked at the red print of Thor's hand of British ass. Or do you think it's too long? You want to go forward?
It's a long one. Let's do the first 2 paragraphs, I think.
Okay. She looked at the red print of Thor's hand on British ass. She pushed the dildo in a little deeper and pulled the little chain by her belly. Britta groaned hard. Isabel felt how Taurus pushed his naked thighs against her buttocks, how his hard cock made its way between her lips. I'm going to fuck you, and in that rhythm you fuck her. Isabel heard herself moaning, heard Britta get fucked, felt the sweat of her belly and the sweat of Britta's ass, heard Taurus say, oh yes, and grabbled his balls with her free hand. Maybe that's enough?
Yeah, that's
okay.
enough.
So who think it's written by a man? Okay.
It's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You want to say something?
Yeah.
Does someone wants to explain? Do
let's
we
pick
already
someone.
see what the female or male gaze is? Well, you guys were right. This is written by a man. It's written by Philip Huff, a Dutch writer. And actually, we did this. We used this one at Lowlands as well. And then everyone was like, "No, this is like the man's fantasy written into like a female perspective." But I think I changed my mind because because in the whole story it's like a short story published in Dons, like an essay and a bundle of more short stories about sex. And in the story he changes like the female and the male perspective all the time. But actually there is not much difference between the gazes, which I thought is maybe a little bit interesting, but like idealistic in the future, maybe there is no difference between.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that in the future and the nuances in the male and female gaze. But first, I want to thank you very much for this quiz. And please stay with us, and if you have any comments, don't hesitate. I would like to ask 2 more guests to come to the stage, Margriet van Heesch and Yael van der Wouden. Welcome, ladies. Yael, you are a writer, editor, and founder of the feminist publishing house Chaos.
Co-founder, yes.
Sorry?
Co-founder.
Co-founder, okay, co-founder. Margriet, you're a scholar, and you work at the University of Amsterdam, and you focus on theories and discourse about gender, sexuality, and romantic love.
Yes, I do.
And you brought a short clip with you, and I suggest that we're going to watch that right away.
Oh, I would love
Yes?
that. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Put your head on my shoulder, hold me in your arms, baby. Won't you squeeze me once, baby? Tell me that you love me too. People say love's a game you just can't win. If there's a way, I'll find it someday, and then this fool will rush in. Put your head on my shoulder, whisper in my ear, oh baby, put your head on my shoulder.
Okay, Margriet, what on earth did we just see?
I must, yeah, every time, it makes me so happy every time to see it. But this is a fragment from a clip of Paul Anka.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Anka was a pop star in the 50s, 60s, and very famous for his beautiful songs about how he desired women, how some girls were his destiny, and then put your head on my shoulder. And what I'm always fascinated about when I think about the male gaze and the female gaze, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later as well, is imagining the female gaze to me is always imagining the desire women have for men. And then we need to point out here that Laura Mulvey, this film critic in the 80s, came up with the term the male gaze to explain how in cinema all women were portrayed through the male gaze, which was in ways of their sexual attractiveness, and that they didn't know they were gazed at. But the gaze is always something very positive. You can gaze into each other's eyes when you're falling in love. It's adoring. But in cinema, the gaze is important because the person who is looked at can't look back. So you can look at that person without any restraints.
So she's objectified, actually.
So you can objectify the person you look at as an erotic object of desire. And then, but the male gaze was about the heterosexual masculine gaze. And then if we turn it around, the female gaze then would be about the heterosexual female gaze. And then I always think about those girls screaming at the boy bands such as the Beatles and here Paul Anka. And this is what happens. So the female gaze, which is then the feminine heterosexual desire, and desire is always entangled with the desire to be desired, which I think is so fascinating about desire and about the gaze. And there's a proliferation of meanings. It really goes really fast. You can't just say like, oh, all men look at women and women can't look back or whatever. So these women already in the 50s, 60s were having the female heterosexual gaze for boy bands and boy pop stars. But the camera here makes it into a spectacle. So through the camera, we look at, or we're gazing at, girls desiring a boy to desire them. So it all turns around that, so this female gaze is again lost in the gaze of the camera, in which we look at their faces being in ecstasy of somebody else. And and this is so funny. Because I was looking at, and I didn't see it before, but I was looking at a picture for this evening. Mm-hmm. And maybe, Julia, you have the device to go through the slides. Julia? Also, don't you have that little black thing to go?
She has it. I think she's on it.
Oh, yeah. To go back to the picture this is the picture of tonight.
Yeah.
And this is a picture of the male gaze.
Yes.
Yeah. So
can you explain that briefly?
Because the gaze, the male gaze, is when you, what was it? When you gaze at the side of my face, which means you don't look back. So we can look at this girl without being caught that we're looking at her.
Okay, and if she would have that same air of ecstasy, but she would look right in the camera, would that be different?
She's a prostitute. Okay. Sorry, that's a joke. There was at the Rijksmuseum. So you walk through the Rijksmuseum, all these women are portrayed, and none of the women look into the eyes of the painter.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, I looked through the Rijksmuseum, and one of these girls was looking right at you. And underneath was it, assumed to be a prostitute. Yeah, because women do not look back when they are looked at.
Yes.
This is the last thing. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm doing a lecture. That's,
No,
okay.
it's great because, I mean, it's very important in an evening about
this
the
is
female
then
gaze
one
that we
last
define it.
thought I want to give to you for thinking this female gaze and male gaze and heterosexual or heteronormative, that everything in the heterosexual matrix, although I know there are a lot of people here who do not have a heterosexual gaze, but a queer gaze or a homosexual gaze, is that this is all, the male and female gaze are entangled in a structure that is called the double sexual standard. So it's not about all men looking at all women or all men objectifying all women, as Lisa knows. It's about how the structure in which we come to know ourselves as desirable subjects, and women come there to know themselves as the objects of desire, being sexually attractive. And also, and I love this, Lisa, in your book, is that there's a lot of women looking in the mirror. So indeed, looking at themselves through this structure of sexual attractiveness, but then in this double standard, boys, in order to be heterosexually attractive, have to prove they're sexually active. And this is the double standard. So boys constantly have to assume this activeness in sexuality, and girls this attractiveness in sexuality. And this is the structures that we all have to tap into growing up. So it's not just, it's how we are socialized. And I think this structure also forms how we think about the female desire and of men and women as opposites.
But in a certain sense, men and women are both asked to perform in a different way, but they're both performing.
Yeah, because this is the thing. I like it because there's a lot of exceptions to the rules. For example, pop star Prince. Do you remember that album that he lies half naked on his album? Yeah. Was it Purple Rain? Was it? He's wearing a purple suit. Okay. The pop star Prince. I know some generations know who he was, and he is therefore showing and being the object of desire of the heterosexual feminine gaze. So in pop music, you see a lot of pop stars who turn it around. David Bowie did the same, wearing a lot of makeup, etc. So, okay, I'm not answering your question. Sorry.
No, but it's. I was just thinking because you say it's a double standard, but on the other hand, both parties need to perform. So there's both a sense of performance that.
Absolutely, but the thing is not just performance. If you do your performance wrong, you get sanctioned. You become a slut, or you're a sissy for boys. So it's not just free choice. You can't just casually decide for yourself, I'm gonna be very active, have a very active sex life, I'm gonna be sexually active instead of sexually attractive. You will get sanctioned.
Okay.
But there's also, I think, if you sort of step out of the lines, the demarcation lines of what is expected within the male gaze, you get penalized in many ways. And there's a lot of confusion happening. I remember one time I showed a friend Rihanna's clip, Bitch Better Have My Money. And we were a little bit drunk. And I don't know if
maybe you can describe it briefly a little bit.
It's Rihanna. It's
Rihanna.
It's Rihanna.
Period.
Rihanna. The story is that a man has her money, and she needs to get back that money. And in the process of that, there's a lot of sort of violence in the vicinity of nudity and sexuality. And I remember watching, and it's just like a very visceral video clip. And I remember just being very excited about getting to watch something like that, even though some of it is very, it brings up a lot of emotions. I remember my friend just going that, I don't know what to do with that.
And why were you excited?
Because it was a visual representation where you had, so Rihanna is incredibly sexual in that video as well, but that is involved with the money, and also there's a lot of, like I said, violence. There's also blood, and it wasn't the classic femme fatale. It was something that was subverting that in a way. It made you as a viewer afraid of that, but not. You weren't turned on by that necessarily. You were just like, shit, can't mess with that. And I remember that frightened my friend, who was just like, he literally did not know what to do with the storyline that didn't involve him getting aroused by sexuality and violence sort of put together.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like, that's a very interesting sort of borderline where things start falling apart, right? Where the female gaze or the male gaze sort of like don't quite behave in the way that they should.
This is what I mean. Like it's not men being the boss of that gaze. It's a structure we have to tap into in order to not be sanctioned. So there is not so much freedom. So
Yael, you brought with you a quote.
I did.
From Miranda July. Maybe you can give us a little bit about the context.
The context.
Of it.
Okay, so this is a short story called The Metal Bowl, and I don't know if anybody's read the first Batman. I'm looking for some nods in the audience. Sure. So I feel like this short story is kind of maybe like it felt like a prequel to the first Batman in a certain way. It's about a woman who, when she was young, played in a porno in order to sort of earn some money and get out of a bad relationship, if I remember it correctly. Years later, she does this weird thing during when she's filming, which is like she makes a little scissoring gesture to indicate that they need to cut or something. And then as she grows up and she moves through the world, every now and then people come up to her in the shop or whatever, and they're just like snip, snip. So to sort of show like, oh yeah, you're that girl from that porno, I recognize you. And so she starts like looking at that porno, and whereas at the time, it was nothing arousing to her. Viewing that video and knowing that these people that she ran into in the store had seen it becomes her only sort of the hot core of her sexual identity. And she can only get off and she can only sort of come or get aroused when watching or thinking about that video.
Okay. Maybe you can read it?
Yes.
Yeah.
A whole lot of preamble. The video shoot became the central sexual experience of my life. To this day, I can't orgasm unless I imagine that I am the pale man, the dead, or the young lesbian watching it. Sometimes all of them together, crowded around one computer screen. I'm them, I'm me. I'm them, I'm me, I come. I showed it to each boyfriend I had after that, to blow their minds, but also to explain my sexual orientation. I was oriented around myself, and in that video, and anyone who'd seen it.
Okay, why did you choose this particular?
I think what I really like about the story, and also a lot of Miranda July's work, is that she manages to sort of put in very uncanny language what it feels to try and be sexual in a female body. And in the body that has grown up being the subject of male gaze. And this idea that the whole idea of sexuality revolves around your body and being found attractive. And so it's not just like that your own desire for something becomes a very minor thing, becomes incredibly overshadowed by the idea of being found attractive by somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I think in this specific story and in that narrative, like this woman, it's sort of, her entire sexual life is reduced to the idea of being found attractive.
Yeah, okay, but Laura Mulvey, she coined the phrase in 1975. We're a little further now down the line, it's 2019. Have things changed?
Lisa. I don't. Yes, I think they did. Things have changed, we have changed, but a lot of structures stayed the same. A lot of mechanisms in which we have to understand ourselves, our desires, and the desire to be desired in a specific kind of way. Because this is the thing. I think what Lisa's book shows is that there are so many different ways to desire or be desired. For these three women only, also within one lifetime. You know, when you're younger, you want to be desired in a completely different way than when you get older, or or fall in love suddenly, or, you know, I love also Marja Pruis' story, how, you know, falling in love opens this desire, although there is nothing there for you, nothing. But falling in love makes you, your judgment gets weird. The Sartre, I'm not a big fan of the Sartre, but he said, like, when you fall in love, your perception changes from a pragmatic interpretation of the world to a magic interpretation of the world. So, you know, whenever your lover doesn't text you back, you're like, okay, that's so magic. It had to be, it's like 5 double meanings there, that he actually does or she does love me by not texting me. So, and you've experienced that with your narrator. But then, so I don't think a lot of things have changed, because we're still stuck in this double standard. We're still stuck in thinking of men and women as oppositions. We're still stuck in forgetting about gay and lesbian desires, about queer desires, about fetish. And so many people have so many different sorts of desires. And I love this, how Yael's example of Miranda July, how her fetish becomes herself being desired, or being the center of being desired, which is beautiful. Because, let's say, I'm definitely sex positive, and, you know, go out and do it, but then, realize that the structures indeed stay the same, that women are still are valued by their sexual attractiveness.
Do we want to change that?
This is the thing, you know, like, I am from the feminist wave that was reading Judith Butler, the American philosopher Judith Butler. But the younger people here now, because I'm getting old and tired of it all, and I also feel a bit outside of that world, because you know, my sexual attractiveness doesn't matter so much anymore now that I have a job and I'm getting older and.
Okay.
I'm engaged to be married, so who cares? And my mother loves me anyhow. And then, you know, but this is the thing. And I have lots of mommy issues, don't get me wrong. I love her, I adore her. So this is the thing. So the younger generation is facing a whole set of new, interesting challenges that come with Instagram and Facebook is out now for young people, I was told last week. Shocking. But it's Instagram and, what was it? Not chat roulette, Snapchat.
Okay, but isn't Instagram...
Also very important for young people, chat roulette. So it's all the time about being seen. Yeah. So,
but at the same time, though...
Wait, let me finish. Okay. You're completely right, I'm talking too much, Yael, but let me finish the sentence.
Conversation.
It's about young people, boys and girls, see themselves through the filter of Instagram. It's constantly how they're being seen, not just as sexually attractive beings, but as everything, as people who go on holidays, as people who study, as people who have parents, people who have friends, and loads of friends, and we all have to like each other with heart.
So they objectify themselves.
But not only sexually, back to Yael.
But not only because I first want you to finish your point.
Well, this is the thing, so we're not only having the gaze that you have through that mirror that Lisa described so beautifully, that women start to learn to see themselves in a mirror as sexually attractive, and check that with themselves. But this is now a whole generation who starts to see themselves through the mirror of Instagram and checks whether they're not only sexually attractive enough, but also using filters to make everything bigger or smaller, but also do they have enough friends? Is their fashion sense in check? You know, do they have the right sneakers? Are they going to the right holiday places? Are they whatever it is that you share, are they drinking the right coffee, eating the right food? You put your food even on Instagram. Everything is through this gaze.
Is it then getting worse?
Up to the younger generation.
Okay. Could I ask maybe a mild representation of maybe a slightly younger generation? Yeah. Not much. I think that you're absolutely right. But I do think that it's not something that is inherent about Instagram or whatever. I think it's the time and society that it was born into. Because on the other hand, what you could say is that for the first time ever, a lot of young women, a lot of queer people get to have the camera in hand. They get to sort of turn it on themselves and, you know, have the power of how do I want to be represented? How do I want the world to see me? And the shame of it is that that little camera that a lot of us were born with in our brain, telling us, you know, how to see ourselves, is still in there. So we on the one hand, we have the power of representation more than ever. There's no editors, you know, but we become the editors. And those editors are formed by a society that is still sadly misogynist and sexist.
Dan, could you say something about that? Do you recognize that? Are you on Instagram?
I am, of course. No, I recognize it totally. But I think, I hope that we go to a future where you can both be like, as a female and as a man, like to be looked at, but also to look and to see and to like to have it, to make it more diverse and make it more transformative. Yeah, because nowadays it's still like what you're saying, the structures are, they take care of that it's the same image again and again.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What's interesting is you have a couple of stills, Yael, from a series.
I do.
And that, I don't know if people saw it, it's called Russian Doll, and it's on Netflix. And we have a few images. And in this series about this woman, who kind of, she has the same night over and over again.
Yeah,
and
she dies.
She dies every time.
Every time.
But there's something interesting happening there. Can you tell us what?
Well, I mean, the reason why I chose these stills is because so Russian Doll was written by a boardroom of women writers, and I think that you can hear that in the dialogue, you can see that in the way that the story is structured, but especially also in the costume design, is that you have her representing maybe not the most common form of female sexuality, but at the same time, there is something about the way that she dresses that does play with an idea of sexuality, right? You have very strong lines, you have like the colors and the collars. And I think it sort of combines the idea of like the gentleman and the gentlewoman, and it blends it together. And it is what I love, because she becomes also rumpled as the series goes on. And there's something incredibly sexy about her. I mean, in my personal, humble opinion. And that sexiness is not in sort of the way that she's objectified, because the camera never objectifies her in this series. It is in the way that it shows her just utter disaster identity and personality, sort of mixed in with glimpses of sexuality. And I thought, just thinking about the way that maybe a female gaze can combine this idea of like, okay, so we have this misogynist ideas already in us, how can we subvert them without like changing them altogether, because that would be impossible.
Yeah, but how do you actually change them? Because there's a camera on her, so
yeah,
she's in the gaze.
Yeah. There is, the way that, of course, that, and you can speak to this, you can change the way that, you pan out, you zoom in. You can change the way that you follow movement. You can change, like, the way that you focus on conversation. You see a lot in sort of quote-unquote misogynist filmmakers, there's a lot of focusing on the mouth. When I was looking for fragments, I looked up Blue is the Warmest Color again, and I don't know if anybody remembers the eating scenes that went on forever, and just like a close up on her mouth, and it was just like, okay, we get it. The mouth is a pussy, okay, fine. And I think in this one, and what happens with Russian Doll is just like, she is just chaos. She's just a blur of movement. There's no focusing in. And sometimes there's like soft scenes, but she's just, the way she dresses, the way that she moves, it's just chaos. But there's still an element of sexuality, because something in the way that it's written, something in the way that her character is put together definitely shows through.
It's interesting that you use the word chaos,
yes,
because that's the name of your publishing company.
Yeah.
And
it's a word that, once you put it in there, it's hard to get it out.
But, chaos, why did you call it that?
Why we call it chaos? Well, initially, this was years ago, we were really going through many, many names, and what we were talking about initially a lot was what we wanted to do with the established literary order in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
and we felt that it could use a little bit of chaos, it could use a little bit of disruption.
Yes, diversity.
Diversity.
Also. Yeah. And what is it you try to do with your publishing company?
We're trying to bring forward various experiences and voices that are usually pushed toward the margins, and I don't just mean margins and they're not being heard, but when they are being heard, they're seen as niche. And we want to sort of create something that doesn't force a writer to be niche just because they're writing about sexuality or identity, but rather see that as a valid story in its own right.
Yeah. Well, if I hear all this, it seems like it's quite complicated to do something with that division, that female-male gaze, to change it. Margriet, what can we do more than, for instance, not focusing on the mouth as much in the series?
Well, I must say I'm super honored to get this question, because it almost seems now that I do have clear-cut solutions for this world, and I don't. And chaos is indeed the name for everything right now, I guess. Not just only the male and the female gaze, but for everything that's happening in politics and world politics, anything. So, but this is the thing. I do think that if we could make amends to think not in oppositions when we talk about men and women or male and female desire anymore, but when we indeed would let the chaos be, that female and male desire actually is, because we do not have a clear idea of why and whom we desire and what we want and how we want to be desired, and it changes constantly throughout your life, and to not also, and this is another thing I was thinking of, because I showed this clip of Paul Anka as the clear-cut textbook example of how the female and male gaze work, and how the female gaze is always, again, mediated through the male gaze, through the camera. But then again, I was also thinking when, preparing for this, about this amazing American sociologist, Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick. And she, she's kind of the establisher of queer theory, together with Judith Butler, and she talked about reparative reading. And she said, you can do a symptomatic reading and read any text about what's wrong with that text, why it's sexist, why it's hating women, why it's stupid, etc. But you can also do a reparative reading. And Eve Sedgwick therefore proposed to do a queer reading of everything, to see okay, where can we see the lesbian gaze, or the queer gaze, or the transgender gaze, or the intersex gaze in these stories, or how can we make this into something tender, because heterosexual men half the time also are very half the time, all the time, very vulnerable out there, hurting, in pain, because they constantly have to prove their sexual activeness, which is tiresome. If you ask me, attractiveness is so much more easy. You just sit laid back there, you be like, do it to me, I give you my body. And then the guy has to, I talked to a Dutch writer 20 years ago, it's like, I decided to offer my body to other men. And I'm like, oh my God, all these men have to do all the work for you? What is that? So this is all this whole heterosexual thing. For heterosexual men, they have to do all the work. They're responsible for the orgasm of the girl, and then they're responsible for their own orgasm. And when something goes right, they're lousy lovers. So it's a minefield out there for everybody. And let's stay with the chaos. I like that.
So actually,
that's my solution.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But in a way then, if you talk about the opposites and that male and female, and you just don't want that anymore, then this evening shouldn't have been called the female gaze. It should have been called the gaze.
But we're not there yet.
The whole way we're talking about male gaze and female gaze, and with that, we're only, still...
Sarah, that is such an interesting thought. Shall we all think about how we call the next evening about this topic?
The gaze.
The gaze.
What do we need to do in the gaze? Well, Lisa, I would like to come back to you. Were you actually thinking of the gaze when you wrote the book?
I wasn't really thinking about any gaze until sort of after, and people were sort of telling me what they saw. I was just looking at individual gazes and the way that they were gazed upon. I feel like I wasn't really. I feel like I wasn't really looking at kind of an umbrella gaze, female or male. I did notice that I say it in my prologue that heterosexual women often look at other women the way that a man does, like through a man's eyes. And I think that's the sort of hangover of a patriarchal society, and I don't know when we're going to get rid of that, but for the most part, you know, I do think it's chaos. I think our desire all sort of bleeds together, and I think we can all have very similar desire. It's more about the way that each country's politics and moment in time views other people's desire. But I think the desire themselves don't change. It's just the way that other people see them and the way that you then respond to that.
And the desires of men and women don't differ too much.
Right.
Okay.
I don't think, I mean, I just feel from what I've seen and spoken to, I don't think they do differ, of course, but they also just differ person to person.
Yeah,
and I think, you know, that's really...
That's the question. Do they differ more because of gender, or are there so many other factors that play a role in how or what a person desires?
Totally.
Yeah. You said something I thought was interesting about women looking at other women, heterosexual women, looking at other women through the eyes of the man. Margriet, can you say something about that?
Yeah, that's the whole structure that enables this gaze, indeed. And it's a double standard that women have to see themselves as sexually attractive within the heterosexual or heteronormative.
You can train
system.
this with yourself, right? If you are a female, you can be consciousness of, like, what is my gaze? How do I look? What do I think when I see other women?
Okay, can you tell me how does it happen? How do you train it?
Well, for example, the other day I was in the train sitting, and then like there were these two guys coming in, and they had suits on, which I think is like a good example of like the man. And I and I recognized with myself that I was like looking away, like being looked at. And then I was like, no, I should look at them. So I was just looking at them. Like I wasn't attractive by them, but like this was like all happening while I was not, and that it changed. Like I felt stronger because I was looking at them. My body changed instead of doing like this.
Which was your first impulse?
Yes.
So actually, it's kind of that's
so you
what
have
you've
to train this.
To look away, to be looked at. Yeah. And then you just turned it. But then you have the question of the prostitute. The question: if you do that, how are you viewed by others? Do these men think, oh my God, we've got one, I'm going to have a cool evening? I mean, what do you do then? Because
then I say no.
Then you say no.
But then there's the danger of violence, right?
Yes,
always
and that's
under,
like
under the
that's
surface
why
all
we
the time.
dealing with these structures.
Yeah, I think Daan is so right, because this is, especially in the street for women, you can indeed practice this. So to not look away when you, especially on the pavement, for example, when you your paths cross.
It's scary in the beginning.
When you cross each other. So not look away. And this is the thing. When I was asked by the SLAA to do this, I walk in the evening a lot through the city center, and I try to not look away. But I ran into some tourists, definitely from Southern Europe. Yeah. And while I was not looking away, they were like, "Hi," and then. And actually, because my age, you'll be like, yeah, hi, because, you know, and you'll stop one day, the cat calling. And then I was like, first I was like, oh my God, this is so sexist. But then again, I was like, no, what about the reparative reading? What about just, you know, a tender moment?
Yeah.
You lock eyes, you say hi.
Yeah.
And you move on.
Yeah.
So,
but it is a problem if your hi is perceived as an invitation.
Absolutely. I wasn't wearing a short skirt, but I was laid out at night after sunset, so there was absolutely
you were asking for it.
Danger, asking for it. Yeah, that's one of the rape myths.
But perhaps that is just a phase that we have to deal with, because we're going to have to do the looking one time or another. I mean, it's going to start somewhere.
I think does it have to start with us, though? I feel. Does it have to start with us? The looking back. Maybe it can also. Yes.
I think that, you know, there's a way to look back that isn't necessarily like hi. You know, it's more like
whatever.
This morning I was walking with my daughter in the train station, and she was on this little pink bag that I was wheeling, and she kept falling off because I also had like 2 other suitcases, and you know, people were like watching me struggle and her falling off, and this one man kept staring at her, and I just got so pissed, and I just was like, what? you know, and like that's a kind of like looking, and that was vocal looking back too, but I feel like that's what I try to do, like, you know, when met with a look, I'm more aggressive now than I ever, and not aggressive like, yeah, I'm like aggressive like, what the F are you looking at? You know, if I sense it as being aggressive.
And how did they respond?
Yeah.
Like, if you stare at, I find that people get scared, even by someone who's rather, you know, short. I feel like I'm extra, you know, Napoleonic complex. I'm extra, like, aggressive in my look, and I think people get scared. Not scared, like physically frightened, but kind of like, oh, you know, like, so I do. I mean, I didn't, in my 20s, I didn't do that.
Okay.
But then you have to, like, deal with the anger and the...
I like anger.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I use it. Yeah.
It's true. You said a while ago, you said, well, but it's always the woman who has to do it. Perhaps, I was thinking that perhaps you wanted to say something.
Remind me, what was the concept?
Yeah, it was that
you said, like,
we're talking about
then now
look.
women have to deal, like, we have to do the looking.
Yeah.
But I think, like, men can train
exactly
things as well.
I think it's if you once again say, like, okay, now is the time for us to start looking back, it's again putting the onus on us to sort of change society.
So there are a lot of men here. What can they do to change their gaze?
I think it's to sort of like be more aware of the way that you stand in the world, the way that you take up just like very simple things like walk down a street. Especially like for the simplest example is when you walk down the street at night and you walk in behind a woman. Try and just being aware of like the way that your footsteps fall, how loudly you walk, how quickly you walk. Try and sort of like take over very quickly to show that you're not walking behind her to sort of like grab at her ponytail or whatever. Yeah. It sounds exaggerated when you put it like that. But who hasn't here walked at home and I heard footsteps behind them and going like, oh fuck, here it comes.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good way of putting it. It does sound involved, but it's also.
I don't know if there's many men who are just going to
calibrate.
Think about calibrate.
but that's like you asked, like what would my advice be? And I think that like
or just
like
not
that.
looking. We look.
I think looking
less.
will happen no matter what.
Yeah. That's why it's the gaze.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But another thing about the gaze is, I think, like the female gaze is well, the constructed female gaze is like going inside, like inwards, because well, we're trained at being looked at, so we're looking at ourselves inwards. So, but I think it's a good thing for men to learn from women to have this gaze, so they can ask themselves like, how do I feel with something, instead of going all rational.
But we all agree that we will gaze no matter what. We will keep on gazing.
As long as we have.
And it's not a bad thing, the gazing, right? Or is it?
Not inherently, of course.
Not inherently.
I don't think anything that we do badly is inherently bad or good.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think I need to end, we're over time, long over time, end the discussion here. I would like to thank all of you for being here and for sharing your ideas on female desire and the gaze, desire and the gaze, I should say. Yes. Okay, it takes some getting used to. Thank you, Yael van der Wouden, Margriet van Heesch, Daan Borrel, Marja Pruis, and last but not least, Lisa Taddeo for being here tonight. And if you like, you can buy 3 women. Well, you can't buy 3 women. You can buy the book 3 Women. And you can have it signed by Lisa Taddeo right now. So, and thank you very much. It was an honor to be hosting this evening. See ya. Bye.